Dig a little deeper, see a little clearer. Learn from the people who've been there before. Real stories, real experience, real insight. This is Ace Quiz Wiz Masterclass.
That's
Welcome,
nice.
everybody. Thank you, Gaurav. This was supposed to be the first opening of the first Assets Masterclass, but it's actually coming out on the third one. But that's okay. Sooner than better. Later, never,
Yeah,
right? So, welcome, everybody. Assets Masterclass, episode 3. Gaurav is back. I am back. And hopefully, you've seen the first and the second episode. If you haven't, please do check them out. I will paste out the link in the chat in a couple of minutes. Uh, this series started with an idea that we wanted to just have a conversation around Atlassian assets, and my co-host just dropped. We'll wait for him to join back as well. But the idea is that we talk more about one of the most important aspects within the ESM domain, which is assets, and the least understood or least appreciated aspect of the ESM as well. That's why we've got Gaurav here. Gaurav, for folks who might not know you, if they are joining here, they probably do. But if they might not know you, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody?
sure, absolutely. Thanks for that, Sajid. Name's already there. Gaurav, also known as GG, pretty commonly across my friends, colleagues, people across the community. So feel free to use whatever you want, you are comfortable with. Also, at times for people outside India, my name becomes a tongue twister. So GG helps there as well. So yeah. Uh, I have been associated with service management for close to a decade and a half, and with JSM for close to a decade. Uh, Currently working with Atlassian for a little over 3 months, but been in the ecosystem long enough to understand what the challenges are. Done some crazy implementations with great people, which led to a lot of learning, and that's what I'm here sharing with you guys. Hopefully, it is useful for you guys, and would love to hear your perspective.
Of course. See, it's 2 minutes. We're 2 minutes into the live stream, and there are 30 people on. So it shows how people are waiting for this series. I think this is one of the most amazingly responded by the members of the community. So thank you for joining us, Gaurav. Once again, you are tuned in from the Atlassian community. If you're joining us from the vertical stream, this is a live stream about assets. Assets is a part of the enterprise service management offering from Atlassian's Jira family of products called Jira Service Management. We're going to dig deeper into it today, continuing from our discussion from the first two episodes, and a little about the community. So if you're hearing or if you're joining this for the first time, Atlassian community is a place where you can learn, connect, and grow with fellow Atlassian enthusiasts. Specifically this one, so this is being co-hosted by two places, community-led learning and quizwiz, but it's originated at a community called CSX Masters with me and my friends Chrissy, Dave, and I host that community. It's an online only community. That means we always do virtual events. Anything and everything around ITSM, ESM, and customer service management is our focus. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. If you have any comments, please send us a note. And yeah, that's it. With that, we will get started with today's episode. I will take myself off camera, highlight Gaurav and his slides, and we'll get started. One comment I would make. So this episode is a little special because today Gaurav will pick one person, one lucky person who will get an Atlassian certification voucher. So Atlassian certification vouchers can be redeemed for an Atlassian examination up to $250, I believe, whichever is the highest. So any exam that you want within the Atlassian ecosystem, and these are pretty expensive exams, you can give them for free. So Gaurav will pick today's winner. Gaurav, what is your criteria today?
The criteria would be simple. It would be engagement. So bring in
Hmm.
your use cases, bring in your implementations, talk about it, make it engaging, and that's your key to winning.
Nice. So Gaurav will pick those up. Please use chat for any questions, any use cases, anything that you want to share with Gaurav, any comments that you want to make while he's presenting. I will be behind the scenes, just highlighting those comments up on front, and we will take pauses every couple of, not couple of minutes, but every little while, so that we come back to your questions as well. In the next episode, we'll actually do a quiz, and we'll have a first, second, third on the basis of that quiz. And yeah, the top three people will get certification vouchers once again. All right, with that, let me take myself off camera. Gaurav, the floor is yours. We've got 35 people on YouTube. LinkedIn is separate, so please, it's
Absolutely. All right. Thanks and welcome everyone. So let's get started. Let's talk about where we left off. We did a couple of sessions. The first one was what is assets? What's the schema design? How do we design it? Then we talked about how do we bring that into our day-to-day working? How do we address the problem of bringing that data into our service catalog? What value it brings? We talked about all of that. Now comes the key part, which is data. And with that comes the trust aspect, with that comes the governance aspect. So, how do you trust the data which you have? And we'll talk about that today. That's the focus area. So, having said that, let's move ahead. And I want an answer for this. If your CEO or your head of the department asks you, how many active assets do we have? How many active computers do we have today in the system? Are you going to trust your system? Are you going to trust the value which your uh, current asset repository spits out? Yes or no? Would you stake your job on it? What do you think, guys? Would you do that or would you not do that? So then, do we get any answers for that?
yep. People say never.
Yeah. So
But
absolutely. So that's what is a common perception that yeah, we have a asset repository.
there are a few anomalies though. Some people say yes because we already are using assets, which is nice.
Way, way to go. Yeah. So
Someone
anybody
says
who's
95% trust, wouldn't put my job on the line for it.
absolutely. So see, the idea is uh, if your data is not trustworthy, if you even if you're saying you trust it 95% of the times, what about the remaining 5%? And when we talk about compliances, when we talk about audits, they don't give us that 5% leeway, right? So we have to be sure always and every time. So it has to be 100%, right? So with that, let's move on. That how do we make the data trusted? How do we ensure that the data which we have that is complete, that is current, that is up to date, and that is relevant as well? So we have to look at all those aspects, right? So what we'll talk about is why there is a problem with the data. What happens? Most of the times, everybody who's when such an engagement starts, when I say engagement, I mean such a project starts, people are really enthusiastic. Yeah, we'll do this, we'll get the latest and the greatest data in. But sooner or later, let's say 6 months down the line, the enthusiasm fades away. Once the enthusiasm fades away, what you're left with is processes. If you haven't defined your processes well, if you haven't structured it to cater to edge cases, the data would go decay, goes stale very soon. The moment you have one instance of your data not presenting you the correct picture, the exact picture, that is the moment from where such projects start going downhill, and the progress in those cases is rapid. So you would, let's say, spend 6 or 8 months to reach to that point, and within a month, the whole trust would be gone because people would say, "Oh, I don't know whether the data is correct or not, so that's why I'm not using it." That's one simple statement, but a big question mark on the whole data, whole project. So we have to ensure that people trust the data. in order for people to trust the data, we should ensure that the data is correct, data is complete, is up to date, right? And for that, you need to have a lot of aspects cater to ownership, catering to governance, the life cycle, the updates being published, who has what rights. All of these aspects need to be addressed and adhered to, right? So that is all this session is all about. And we'll also talk about some of the risks which we always have and possibly what are the next steps in such scenarios, right? And as always, feel free to stop me, feel free to push in the chat whatever thoughts you have, whatever questions you have, and we'll take them up. All right. So, next part, the next question basically. We talked about that, yes, we agree that the data is always has some challenge. It may not be complete, it may not be the accurate piece. But if I say, okay, this data is correct today, right? After a week, would you stake your reputation on this data again? I say the correct data is today we have 100 laptops available within the company. 1 week from now, today is 24th, 1st of July, we circle back again and I ask you how many available laptops do we have? So would you stake your reputation and say 100 because that's the figure Gaurav gave us a week back? The answer still would be no. The reason being that the data gets updated, data gets decayed or stale very quickly. Every day, certain change would happen. We might procure new laptops, we might allocate some laptops. So 100 would not be the number I would stake my reputation on. Reason being, it is getting updated, it is getting refreshed on a very frequent basis. So somebody has to govern it. Who can refresh it? Who can update it? We have to define those governance levels on the data, right? Until unless we do that, it's not trustworthy. So what are the key challenges in ensure trusting the data, in ensuring that we have the latest and the greatest data anytime and every time we go and access our assets? And when I say assets, I mean the CMDB, whatever the tool it may be stored in. We are focusing on JSM assets, but this holds true for any tool you might be using. If you cannot trust the data, you cannot trust the process, then the project would not be success. So there are three main challenges. One is the ownership drift. What does this mean? When I say ownership drift, basically it means who owns the data. When we talk about data, it's not only the values or the objects we are talking about or the attributes we are talking about, the overall schema. Can anybody go in and make a change to the schema? If the answer is yes, then how do you trust the schema at all? Today it is showing me 10 object types. Tomorrow it may show me 15. Day after tomorrow it might show me only 5. So if I do not define my ownership of the schema and subsequently of the object types and the object that who owns it in order to make certain changes to the schema, whose approval do we need? Who is the person or the team whose approval is required? It would decay, it would go stale very quickly. That's one aspect of it. And it encompasses not only schema, not only object types, it encompasses everything, even the data which is being put in, right? We'll come to the last bit of it again. We'll touch about the objects again in the last challenge. The second one I'll talk about is the life cycle changes. We talked about processes, who governs the processes or how the processes are governed or governing the objects. That is critical. If an object, we are talking about a laptop, if that is the case, if laptop is the example and I do not update or we do not have a life cycle defined for the object, how do we ensure that the status which is being shown is the correct one? It may show that it is available in the inventory in the stock room, Whereas the reality would be that laptop has already been allocated to an employee maybe 6 months ago, because we are not updating it, because we are not adhering to any life cycle, we are not adhering to any process. Boom, our data is again stale, again decayed, not trustworthy. Last but not the least, import failures. And I have a real life example for this. So what happened is I was working with a customer, uh, banking industry customer, BFSI customer, and they started using assets for one of their organizations. It was the smallest bit of their organization, and they were hitting the limit of about 5 lakh objects in the system. I'll tell you the reason in a while, but wanted to highlight import failures do not only mean that the data which you are importing or your import mechanism fails. Import failure also means that your import is not properly set up. It might bring in duplicate data, it might bring in uh, old historic data which is not correct. That is also a failure, right? So coming back to the example, what was happening is they were bringing in duplicate data, duplicate objects, because their import mechanism or the import process was not properly set. You, the unique keys were not properly defined. Due to that, for a single object, they had over 10,000 entries, and that's how they were hitting the limit of 5 lakh objects or 500,000 objects. So trying to be neutral in that scenario. So that is the volume of objects they had, but in reality, they had much less count of objects just because their imports were not properly defined. That led to the decay in the trust. So their data was not trustworthy. How do we do that? How do we set up an object or a import which is trustworthy? We'll definitely take a look at it in a while. So when on the point of import, we'll talk about what are the various ways of doing imports. We'll talk about that. Before that, I would like to take a pause and ask if there are any questions. All right. Sajid, any
Nothing at the
questions?
no, no, nothing at the moment. We do have the polls, Gaurav. So whenever you want me to release the polls, please let me know.
Do we have that all in a single go? If
Yep.
yes,
No,
then we can
no,
release it.
no. We can decide. Like, so first one you've already done when we asked
Yeah.
about trusting the data asset. But like, if you
Yeah.
want, we can do the duplicate one and whenever you want in that order.
Okay. Yeah, let's do the duplicate one and see what are
All
the
right.
responses because yeah.
All right. So let's do the duplicate one. So the question says, duplicates keep popping up in your data. Who do you blame first? The person who set up the import, the tool, Gaurav or Dave from IT? Or honestly, you don't know who to find? Let's see. So you just have to enter one, two, three, or four in the comments, and StreamYard should be smart enough to pick what you're entering. So if you want one, just say one. See, Tabby just said four. So as of now, it's just 100% at four. Actually, most people are saying four. Probably past me. I don't know if Gaurav has had correct answers as well. It could be a trick question. Oh, Prithvi Raj says person who set up the import. Hmm. Okay,
Yep.
so does
Yep.
Andrew. Okay, it's either that, right? Like you either blame the person who set it up, or you say I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's the first one. The answer is the first one. So and rather than blaming the person, it should be because you don't have one person setting all of this up. You have a team. You have to mutually decide. And
Sure.
at times, the person who is setting it up may not be the best judge of it.
Yeah.
He's relying on the team who is owning the infrastructure or who is owning the schema or object type. So the more we discuss, the more we interact, that's where we get to it. So rather than blaming the person, we need to go and do a sanity check on our schema imports. And that's what we are coming to next.
Yes.
So,
It's a very interesting
how,
comment. Somebody says, I say four because I would probably the person who set it up.
so that would be me probably. Uh, if I read the name properly, yeah, I would definitely say I don't know who did that. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah. This actually, again, the same person also says this a very interesting point. True, but as the person who set it up, it's also my job to ask the question businesses doesn't think of, because that's what usually
absolutely,
happens, right?
yeah. So what happens is in an implementation, and that is something we would have discussed in the next session, business or the relevant teams, they simply say, oh, we don't know. And that is where, as an implementer of assets, the onus comes on us to place those difficult questions, identify and think about those obscure use cases which would pollute the data,
Hmm.
right? So, having w- w- going back to my example, when I was looking at the data, initially the first object type I picked had 180,000 object list, which is 1.8 lakh objects. How do you identify the pattern that, okay, something's wrong before going into the customer or going to the management and saying something is wrong? You need to identify what is wrong and why is it wrong. In order to understand that, you need to understand what is coming in, right? What is being ingested by the system. It has blown up to 1.8 lakh objects or 180,000 objects, but why? Is there a pattern? Can you identify a pattern, right? So once you have identified that pattern, over a period of time, you would know what questions to ask to the management. So basic, very simple question is, how do you uniquely identify a simple object or a simple device?
Hmm.
For a laptop, it's easy. You would say serial number, right? I have a
Sure.
question on that. You are procuring laptops from three different vendors. Is each of them processing the serial number same?
Sure.
Are they calling the serial number as serial number, right? So
Hmm.
these are the questions you need to get answers for from the team who is owning the process, right? And it's a mutual bi-directional discussion. It's not like we want to put them in a difficult spot. It's like we want to ensure that their life becomes easier 6 months down the line. They are not in this mess which they are today after 6 months. Because the team who is implementing, so there are two aspects. Either you are an in-house team or an out of the house a vendor who would do the implementation and go away. If that is the case, you might still live. But if that is not the case, if you are the in-house team, then it's gonna come back to you and
Yeah.
bite you in the back. So it's gonna be a difficult situation. So think about these aspects that, okay, I'm getting data from five different sources. How do I ensure that I've got that one golden record? How do I bring it to
Hmm.
that? So we'll talk about all of that. Let's talk about how do we ensure that the number which we are.
Our good friend Ankit has a question. How challenging is it to detect duplicate data?
Okay, it takes a bit of time. It takes a bit of analysis and experience with the product. So it varies. If you are, let's say, starting off now, you have if you have seen the world, you would pick it up much quicker. But in order to understand what the if there are duplicate records, one of the key aspects is to understand what your primary key or the unique key is. If you can easily identify that, that means the probability of having duplicates is less, right? But if you cannot with conviction say, yeah, this is my primary key and or a unique key, then the point is or the scenario is you are going to have a lot of duplicates
Hmm.
more often than not, right? All right. So coming back, how do we get the data in? So there are basically three ways, and I'm focusing on JSM assets now. One is manual creation. You go and create every object on your own, adhere to all the guidelines which you may have or which you may not have, which the organization has set up for you. Pretty simple, but it's not scalable, right? Then comes the CSV or the JSON imports or the regular import mechanisms from different sources. It could be from your uh, a CSV file which you have hosted somewhere, or it could be from your from the Jira discovery tool or the Atlassian discovery tool. For who do not know or are not aware of, Atlassian does have a agentless discovery tool which works based on your IP addresses, the configurations of the IP. So that's what it is. So that's another import mechanism. It usually works well when you have to do the first bulk upload or when you're migrating, and or you're uploading it in a batch manner, in a structured batches over a period of time. It works well. The latest and the greatest one is Data Manager, which basically is to ensure that you have consistently fresh data. It reads from various sources, and that's how it is. So those are your mechanisms, and how do you design your imports? This is ensure this, and this is where the approach towards your import designing helps significantly. After this, I'll move on to the practical side of it, show you both CSV import, some of the critical CSV imports or challenges or the finer nuances of CSV import. Then we'll also talk about data manager. So those are some of the things. The first thing for any import is to understand your key, your external key or your unique key or unique identifier by which you can say that, yes, this is one unique object. So by default, the functionality is if you are importing and that unique key is not available, it would create an object. If it is available, it would update the object. So you have to be consistent. You have to think it through what your unique identifier would be. Then is your attribute mapping, be it, let's say, your CSV, be it your JSON, be it your data manager. Your attribute mapping is critical. What is the value you want to put against which attribute, right? Then is reference resolution. So if you're referring to, let's say, a different object, how do you do that? Again, next is update behavior and reconciliation. These two are more focused towards data manager, because what happens is in data manager, what we do is we are bringing the data in from multiple data sources, and then we are creating one unique record. So you reconcile your data. You can also say that, okay, from one source I'm picking 5 fields, from the other source I'm picking the remaining 4. So you can do that level of reconciliation and create one golden record to push it into assets. So that is all you can do. Now quickly moving on to the practical side of it. Just let me know if it's fair enough, or you want me to zoom in a bit. I can do that.
Maybe zoom in a little, Gaurav.
Yeah. Sajid, you were saying something.
Oh, I was saying if you could zoom in just a little bit.
Sure. Let me figure that one out. I'm new to Mac. I'm still learning the bits of it. So if somebody can help me with the keys for that, for zooming in.
Or you can just use your two-finger pointer, go to the middle screen and just zoom in. Or just use your browser to zoom in. There you go. Can
I'm
you see
still,
zoom
yeah.
100%? Yes, there you go. One more maybe. There you go. Perfect.
All right. So again, back to our schemas. what we are going to do is we are going to pick up a schema. This schema has about 300 odd objects. So let's look at this schema. I've got this open for you. I've picked up one object for reference. The reason I picked up this one is because it is linked to multiple objects in a single relationship. The reason I'm picking this one up is setting up an import via CSV is pretty straightforward. And I'll walk you through the steps of that. But one of the finer nuances is what if one of the relationship or related field has more than one value? How do you address that? And it takes quite a bit of back and forth before you can do it. But again, uh, since I've done it quite a number of times, I thought I'll pick this use case, a different one, rather than walking you through a standard one. So how we do it is we go to schema settings, right? And within schema settings, we have got the imports. So if you see, I've got all the imports. I did a CSV import for populating this particular schema. Let's do a create import. Now from here, if you see, we have got 5 different options. The first one is the discovery import, basically to ingest the data from the Atlassian discovery tool, which I talked about a few minutes back. And it's pretty straightforward. You get that data or the file from the discovery tool and you ingest it here. Next is the data manager import. So once you have set up your data manager and you can define your import here, it would import the data from data manager. Next to JSON or CSV, these are the two imports where you can manually import or even you can schedule your imports. Last but not the least is the external import, which basically means if you want to import from via APIs or some external tools, you can define your import here and then via the APIs, you can run those imports. So these are the 5 basic ways of importing data into assets, right? Let's look at one of the imports. I'm currently looking at the artwork import, and then we'll go to the insurance import because that's the one we were focusing on. So once we do the define or create the import, what it does is we have to do a mapping with an existing object type, or we say tell the import that okay, you go ahead and create it. So if we tell it that you go ahead and create it, it would create the object type and the attributes to the best of its understanding. It would create all the attributes, but when it comes down to setting up a relationship, it may not do that. So that's where if you are setting up a well-connected object schema, then you would need to manually create the schema and manually create this mapping. So mapping is pretty straightforward, nothing fancy in that. So you define your data source on your CSV file, what's the column name, and then what's the attribute name. You do that mapping. Uh, the interesting part comes here. So when you do it, that who create when you have to do the relationship. So in this case, the artwork, who created that art. So it needs to be linked to an artist's name. So what you need to do is you need to define it. It would be an object type. It would pick it by its own. The other part is you have to do this little bit of aspect. So one is simple, it would simply pick the attribute, but in this case, we need to define the relationship. So we'll tell it that, okay, to which attribute of artist. So if you remember, we did this relationship when we were defining the schema that, okay, created by would link to an artist. So which attribute of artist I want to map it by, that's what I'm saying. Rather than just doing a simple one, I'm doing an advanced and writing a small AQL, the asset query language, which we talked about. So in order to ensure that all of them are together, I did them at the end. So this is how you do it. This is one aspect of it. The other piece which I wanted to show you is this one. So when it comes to multiple fields, so covered locations is the one. If I go back here, did I pick the right schema? Yeah. So insurance policy, it was I believe this was the policy. Yeah. So if you see covered locations has got multiple options in there. So how you need to do is you need to in your CSV file, your values should be segregated in a single cell by a double pipe symbol. So just repeating myself, your CSV file, it should have the fields in a double pipe symbol. So those values should be segregated by double pipe symbol, right? Once you have that, what you need to do is you need to define your define your import mechanism, your CSV import. Once you do that, you give it this kind of a what do you call AQL, where it says the label or the name is in covered locations and it iterates the covered locations. If we have got, let's say, 10 values in that CSV file, it would iterate it 10 times. So that's how it works. And let me see if I have got that file handy. I can show you that. Mm, yeah, I can give me 1 second. I can bring it up.
While you do that, Gaurav, do you want to answer a question somebody has asked in the chat?
Sure, sure.
Yeah. Prithviraj asks, what about maintaining real-time data from the data sources rather than doing manual imports to update the latest data?
Absolutely. I would come to that in a bit. So let me just see if I've got the file right. So yeah, if you see this file, I'll zoom in a bit on this. Uh, Again, my problem with Zoom. Better? Yeah, I believe better now. So if you see this, the first value is segregated from the second value by a double pipe symbol. So it treats it as value one, then breaks it value two, and so on and so forth. So in order to you know put in multiple values, this is how you do that, right? Coming to the question from Prithvi Raj, right? I believe that was the person who asked the question, right?
That's right.
So in order to do that, there are a couple of ways. One is you can create import schedule, right? So now what would happen is in such a scenario, you define the file from which it is reading. Rather than doing that, what you do is if you have, let's say, your CSV file hosted somewhere. So let's do that. You give it a name and then you say that, okay, import the data from a web address and you give it the web address name. You can retain or sustain or maintain your file on a web address wherever you have it. Once you have that file well set up, you define that in here, the address you give it here. And depending upon whether you have created your object types and your attributes for that object type, you can check or uncheck it, right? Once you do that, you would have a similar import defined for you, right? And then in your import, you can create an import schedule. So whether you want to run it daily, you want to run it only once, you can define that, and you can define at what frequency does it run. So currently it does not go below daily. You cannot run it, let's say, every 6 hours or something like that. But once you set it up, it would import your data on that frequency. I hope that answers your question, Prithvi Raj, sorry.
There's another question. It says, is there any documentation specifically for CSV operators, like explaining the double pipe,
There
etc.?
is, yes, yes, there is. If you I don't have it handy. I'll have to search it for you, or you. It's publicly available. This is something which I learned even before joining Atlassian, so it's not something which is hidden by Atlassian. It is publicly available, and to tell you honestly, the Atlassian community is filled up with these responses. If you come up with such a scenario, there are publish it on the Atlassian community, and people would love to help you out there. So, so this is something which I learned from the community, not from the documentation, just to be very clear about. So they give examples that, okay, I did, this was my use case, I did it like this, you can try it out, and so on and so forth. So that's how we do it. All right. And the it has to be a public link, Andrew. Currently, there's no authentication, so there's a risk of data being exposed, but that is the current scenario. All right, let's. Thanks, Prithvi, for that. All right, let's move ahead. In the interest of time, we have got what roughly about 20 minutes to go. We have got two big topics to cover. One is data manager. The other is the data governance. We have to ensure that we do that. All right. So data manager. Once you log in, you click here. This is your data manager aspect, right? You click on data manager. This is the screen you come up with. So in order to collect the data, what you do is the data is collected based on certain object classes. Currently, it is limited. It can pick up data only for limited object classes. I'll quickly show you the ones which are available. So these are the five data classes which are currently available. More are being worked upon as we speak. I don't have a timeline as to when more would be released, but that's the information I have. So what happens when we when we look at one of the data objects, right, or data classes? So the objects which it is bringing in, it is bringing from multiple sources. So it tells you which object is being pulled by which data source. And in order to see how many data sources you have, let's take a step back. You can see all your data sources, right? You are getting compute from variables, you're getting compute from center guest, you're getting from qualsys, your sccm, you can have ad bringing in, you can have intune bringing all your data. So based on that, you can define what you want to do with this data, right? In order to add a new, let's say, data source, you can add a new data source. These are the data adapters which are currently available, right? You have got Azure VM, you have got Qualys, you have got JAMF, you have got Intune. So all of these are currently available, and more are being added as we keep speaking. So these the volume or the number of data sources which we have, they keep adding it as in when a new adapter is available. These are called adapters. You can do that. And what you can do is you can look at this. I'll show you. Uh, sorry, logs, not this, but rather we can look at the cleansing statistics. So basically, what we can do is we do 5 steps for it. Let me go back and show you that. If I look at one of the data sources, I'll first show you the, so this is the configuration, we'll come to it in a bit. So from WSUS, this is the data we are getting. We are getting just the name of it. So it is bringing 665 records. This is the raw data which we are getting. Now, what do we mean by raw data? Basically, it means the simplistic form of the data which we are getting, which we are fetching from it. Now we can transform this data. At times, what happens is you want to do certain calculations on your data. You want to remove all the null values. Maybe uh, you want it to be a mathematical value. So if it's a null, rather than null, you want a zero there. You can do all of those. You can replace certain strings, right? So that is one piece. That's one. Mapping is, again, how do you map it to your new data sources, to your destination object class? So which field maps to what? This is you define it here. Cleanse is an important one. Basically, what we talked about, removing the duplicate values. So when you're doing it via the CSV, the onus lies on us as the creator of that import or the executor of that import to ensure that there is no duplicate data. But since we are doing it via the system, it we are reading it from a third party system, which may or may not be owned by us. What we do is we ensure that there are no duplicates. So we can create cleansing rules like remove duplicates. What do you want to do in case when you fetch the data, there are two records with the same unique key? So that data. And then when you want to merge the data in compute, so within compute, you are getting data from multiple sources. What are your guidelines? What are your relations for merging that data? Once you have that, then you can define your import mechanism for your compute data into your object schema. So that schema process remains the same. So this is where you are configuring what you are ingesting and how you are ingesting, how the final data would look like for this particular data import, right? So that would cover our data import. Before we get into data governance, I would like to take a quick pause and ask if there are any questions from anybody.
Tabby says this has so much potential. I didn't even know this was available until just now.
I completely agree with Tabby, and Tabby, I would recommend you keep an eye out on this. It a lot of so to be honest, before this week, the UI was completely different. So when I was preparing for this session and I logged in on Monday, I logged in after a week and a half, and I was like, okay, I'm lost. So we are getting so many new features with respect to data manager that I would always recommend you keep looking at it. New adapters are being added, new controls are being added. So keep exploring, and that's how we would keep learning. And very rightly said, it has got a lot of potential to improve upon. Still, it's there. All right. Any other questions?
No questions, but we've got two more polls.
Yep. We can
All right,
fire
so
the third one. Yeah.
okay, let's do one which says an automation just an automation just paged the wrong team at 2 a.m. Which is the most likely culprit? The automation rule is haunted, the team updated but records did not, Mercury is in retrograde, or the on call roster is not correct or aspirational. Again, you can just write 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right. Prithviraj also says I tried that earlier and the import was through CLI manually, which is now through UI. So I think that's a change which I'm glad you're talking about.
Absolutely. So when I was doing the early EAP before the EAP for data manager, it was completely through CLI. We had to define each attribute, each bit of it for each adapter we wanted to configure. And there were
Mhm.
like 10 or 12 of them at that point. We are close to 30 now, if I recall the number correctly. So
Nice.
even testing those 10 was a humongous task because it was so much manual activity involved. But now it's
Of course.
very,
Very
very
easy.
UI centric.
Nice. All right. Looks like people know that it's an issue of team getting updated, but the records did not.
Yes. So maybe somebody like me moved the team and I did not inform the correct stakeholders so that I'm moving out or moving teams. Right. So coming back to who keeps the number true, we started off that are we trusting the number? So there are two aspects to trusting. One, whether the data is correct or not. Our imports are correct, everything is great, but we do not define who governs that import. So what would happen is, come tomorrow, somebody would go in and make a change and nobody would own it. The biggest conundrum of change management. So yeah, something changed, but I didn't approve it, or I don't know who did that. So that holds true for assets also, or any asset management schema as well. So what you need to do is you need to define who are your data stewards, who owns this data, right? Once you define that, then you need to also ensure that on a regular basis that is being reviewed and updated, right? So when we and then life cycles and permissions, all of this becomes a part of the ownership. So ownership is not something that, okay, write my name in the owner. You have to define the owner for this schema, or write my name, I'll take care of it. No, it's not that. I need to take that onus on myself, that yes, if I'm the owner, I have to ensure that the data is correct, whether I do it on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. I have to define those review cycles. I have to ensure that once it's defined, it is being taken care of, right? So now, once we say that ownership, how do you define ownership within JSM assets? So there are certain roles in JSM assets for each schema, which you define, and you define the ownership of that. By default, it's not defined. It is blank. Let me quickly show it to you. So these are your four roles: object schema managers, object schema developers. Then you have got the users and the viewers. Very simple. The name give away a lot in this aspect. So the managers are the people who actually own the schema. When I say own the schema, in terms of what object types, what attributes, what is the attribute type. So even that is a critical aspect. Can that attribute, or the configuration of that attribute, can it hold more than one value, or should it only have one value? Or should it be an object type, or should it be a user type? So there are multiple decision points where you want to have that ownership, somebody to manage that schema, to own that schema, so that your structure doesn't break. And you, in case there's a change in the structure, you have somebody to hold responsible, right? That's the highest level, the overall or the overarching people who own that schema. Next comes the developer. Now, developers, they do not have the access to change the schema per se, or make updates to the attributes. No, they cannot do that to the structure of the schema. But what they can do is they can define integrations, create imports, and execute those imports, right? Third comes the users. Now, the users can go in and change a specific record, an object, that okay, maybe you want your support team to be the user of the schema, because once a laptop is allocated, right, you want them to make that change. You want them to, for the audit trail, for the compliance purposes, you want them to be able to make that update, that this laptop is now, the status of this is changed from, let's say, in store to allocated, and it is allocated to XYZ, or whoever it is allocated to. Or this laptop has been received back, maybe the employee has been allocated a new laptop, so you want to make that kind of change. Or in case of change management, the application version has been updated. So previous was, let's say, version 4.2, it is now 4.2.6 or whatever, right? So all those changes, all those records, you want the users, you do not want the developers or the managers to be held responsible for making such updates. You can define the processes on top of it, maybe via Jira or JSM tickets. You are pushing those updates. That's great, but for audit purposes, you want to ensure that whoever is triggering that automation rule, is that name is captured, for your audit and your compliance purposes. Last but not the least are the viewers who can use it, who can just view it. So this is what the four roles are and what's the intent of those four roles. As I said, by default, it is no user is selected. If you see, we can put it on users or groups or different applications. We can define it accordingly. But by default, if we do not assign anybody a role, everybody has every role, right? So by default, everybody is able to make changes to the schema which you do not want. So for your proper implementation, ensure that you are making changes or you are updating your records, the ownership records. And there are timely audits. Now, when I say timely, it doesn't mean you have to do an audit daily or a weekly. It could be a 3 month audit and you have records for that, right? So this is something which is critical, which would ensure that your data is correct. You can trust the data. You can stake your reputation and a job for the data based on the data, right? So that's what it is. Now, coming to the last bit of it, what corrupts the numbers? What leads us to not getting the correct number or not trusting the data? The first one is the duplicate records. So, what, as I told you, the example which I took earlier, right? If you have got multiple records for the same device, you cannot trust the data. So what you need to do is, in order to do that, you need to find the unique identifier for that. And that identifier should be consistent across different systems. If you're pulling data from 5 different systems, it should point to the correct record every time across the systems. Going back to my example, and this was a real example or real problem we faced. For the for one of the customers, we were getting data from 2 different sources. We were procuring devices from 2 different vendors. Both of them were calling serial number differently. So how do you ensure that? The third aspect was, what is it in our system, in the customer system? So you had 3 disparate systems, right? So you need to, before setting your imports up, you need to define this. Next is the stale data. Now, stale data, how does the data get stale? This depends upon the import frequency. When do you start your import? How frequently do you import your data? Is it once a day? Is it twice a day, thrice a day? Or is it once a week or once a month? Depends upon how you want to structure it, what data it is bringing, what's the criticality of that data, right? So if your data is stale, nobody trusts your data. Next comes broken references. Ideally, I should be able to, from one laptop or one particular object, I should be able to identify what its upstream and downstream are. If I'm not able to do that, then my data is useless. Then it's just a glorified Excel sheet, which does not tell me anything, right? And we do not want our CMDB, our asset structure, to be a glorified Excel sheet, which we can visualize on the screen. No, we do not want that. We want it to refer to different, the upstreams, tell the dependencies, tell the downstreams. In case of a change management scenario, it should be able to help us with the risk assessment. That is where the real value of your CMDB lies. Can it help me with the risk assessment of a change? If it cannot, then we have to rethink our strategy, how we are doing it and what we are doing. Last but not the least is governance fatigue. And I've seen it happen, the governance fatigue. When we are starting a project, we have got all the enthusiasm, we have got all the push, and we say, yeah, we'll review it on a daily basis or a monthly basis. But 10 months down the line, that enthusiasm is gone. And this becomes an overhead. So we should have the governance defined in a way that it is consistent enough yet it is not a burden. It's not treated as a burden. It becomes a part of our life. It becomes a part of the daily routine which we need to do in order to ensure that we have got the latest and the greatest data, right? So moving ahead, in case there are no questions, how do you start with it? How you start with it is you start small, and I'm seeing the poll on the screen, and whoever answered, that's absolutely right. And this is what we talked probably in the first session also. When we are creating that schema, we start small. Even with the data, we start small. We should not think about ingesting or consuming all 100,000 records in a single attempt, because as we go along, we'll find finer nuances, we'll uncover those finer details which are not currently being captured or are not currently properly mapped, maybe, right? Or nobody has thought of those finer nuances. So first identify one source, start small, and make it an iterative process. That's what design for change means. Make it iterative. You do that one iteration, you evaluate what it is, how accurate your data is, how useful your data is. There could be certain fields which you might say, oh, we are not using it. Should we even have that? So one of the biggest problems with assets is the data overload or the information overload, which it can do, it can bring with it. So we have to ensure that we are optimizing it in all the right ways, not only getting the right data in, but ensuring that we have consistently ensuring we have the right correct values, not an information overload, right? So that's what it is. Coming back to the same part where we started off, can if you can answer these for your CEO, great. You have got great data, but that's what our North Star is. That's what we want to focus on and get it all sorted, right? And that's about it. That's all I had. I would love to pause here uh, and take questions if there are any.
I don't see any questions yet. We are just 3 minutes up on time. If anybody has any questions, please comment those in the chat. Otherwise, I think Gaurav, you can just pick today's winner and you can announce who gets today's certification voucher.
I'll have to look
Mm.
at the chat. I haven't had a chance to look at it. We'll announce it later on. Give
Yep.
us some time, guys. But
Gaurav can
we'll
just comment this video, who's the winner, and you guys can just ping me on LinkedIn. I'll make sure that you get your certification voucher. Yeah.
all right.
Thank you so much, Gaurav.
There
Perfect
are
session
no
again.
questions.
Very,
I
very
would,
active.
yeah.
Sorry, there's this. Yeah, like Andrew says it perfectly. No questions, but great content. Thank you. Very
Thanks,
informative.
Andrew.
Yeah, everybody says thank you to you. There's one question from Prithviraj. It says regarding the assets data manager with Rovo, how good it works.
So, okay. Currently, this was something which was suggested to me, and I was planning to cover it in the last session because we haven't touched upon it. And honestly, I did not even think about touching it until unless it was highlighted.
And it's
Uh,
been highlighted twice. Stefan also is asking
yes,
the same thing.
I hope this is not the Stefan. I believe it is. So, yeah, leaving that aside, currently Rovo has limited capabilities with assets. It can search and present to you the assets, but it cannot create a schema or cannot create an import for you right now, but that is being worked upon as we speak. There are quite a lot of things which you might believe that you might have heard me saying it is currently not a feature, but it is being worked upon. So that is actually happening, and I have got I've given quite a bit of feedback to a lot of product managers, and we are discussing quite a lot of things there. So
Nice.
I don't have a timeline for that, but yeah, those would be coming up soon.
How fun it would be if it is launched by the time fourth episode comes into.
I won't hold my breath for it,
Sure, of
honestly.
course.
But yeah, those are being discussed and being worked upon.
Perfect. Yep, some really good comments coming in. Uh, Prithviraj says, as I have used Confluence DB and Asset Schema, it doesn't exactly write data based on the robo model, as
Yes.
indexing doesn't work correctly. That's true. Tabby says, I had the opportunity to test the robo skill, but unfortunately, it's still a long way
It
from
is
being ready to
so
use.
right now when we talk about robo skill, it can do a lot of searching for you. It
Hmm.
can bring help you with the searching, but then again, it doesn't go much beyond that. So that
Right.
is something which we all are hoping to get soon.
Soon. Soon is the key word there.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Once again, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Gaurav. If you have any questions, please again post those in the comments. We meet Gaurav again in 2 weeks for the fourth episode, and this time with updated content around Rovo. Maybe we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Please check out this video later. Point Gaurav would comment who's the winner of today's certification voucher, replaying the chat. Do make sure that what just happened? Don't hide. Just there we go. Do support the channel. We do this a lot. Subscribe, like, usual stuff, whatever we do on YouTube. Not a very big content creator like my good friend Rob Heen, but I am still doing YouTube. So all our series content are here. You can go check out the playlist. I'm going to create a masterclass specific playlist. So you'll see all the 3 episodes, including today, and then add the fourth one as well. Once again, thank you. We are 7 minutes over time, but as always, thank you so much, Kara. It was perfect session.
All right. Thank you. Have a good one, everyone. Thank you. Bye bye.
Dig a little deeper, see a